are moving into the tinkering mode now, where the big job, the big kind of like patch job of getting that Olympic gold has been done. We saw them do that very well. You can go back to this show and talk about that whole journey, but now they need to set up sustainability for the future, and this is the first step in doing that. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of The Late Sub. I am your host, Claire Watkins. It is Thursday, October 17th, and we have some kind of breaking news. We have some U.S. Women's National Team analysis to get into. I want to talk about another crazy WNBA Finals game that we witnessed last night, talk about what an epic series that has been and the top performers there and kind of where we think it's been and where we think it's going. We have so much to dig into. Let's get started. Okay, big news item of the day. The U.S. Women's National Team roster for their October friendlies is here. They are playing 3 games. You heard it. 3 games in this international window, 2 against Iceland and 1 against Argentina. They will all be played in the United States. Good mix here. We're going to run down all the names. We're going to talk a little bit about what Emma Hayes said today, U.S. Women's National Team head coach Emma Hayes, because I actually thought there was a very illuminating availability with her today. Talk about what we would like to see, sort of preview these games, and talk about this group. So let's just kind of dive in with the big list of names, and then we'll talk about what it all means. So for goalkeepers, Jane Campbell, Casey Murphy, Alyssa Nair, so that group from the Olympic squad. Defenders, Emily Fox, Eva Gaetino, Naomi Girma, Casey Kruger, Haley Mace, Alyssa Mallinson, Jenna Neiswanger, Emily Sams, Emily Sonnet. Midfielders, Corbin Albert, Sam Coffey, Hal Hirschfeld, Lindsay Horan, Rose Lavelle, Olivia Moultrie, and Ashley Sanchez. Forwards, Yasmin Ryan, Emma Sears, Jaden Shaw, Sophia Smith, Mallory Swanson, Alyssa Thompson, and Lynn Williams. So before we kind of analyze what this all means, and again, I think Hayes gave like some very good answers today about what her thought process is right now, why this group is the way that it is, and what we're going to see in these games. We do have to note, so this is the United States Victory Tour roster for the 2024 Olympic Games. I saw actually some confusion on Twitter, so it's good to see that like the U.S. Women's National Team fandom is growing, but this is something that has been in place in their collective bargaining agreement for a number of years. It basically is saying that the U.S. Federation, U.S. Soccer Federation, likes these games. They like to play them in the continental United States because it is a moneymaker for the Federation. In turn, the Olympic squad goes, okay, if this is a moneymaker for the Federation, these friendlies are good for revenue for the Federation. We want to be as the team that, got that notoriety and got that fame by going and winning that gold medal. We want to be contractually obligated to play in those. It used to be multiple international breaks. It used to dictate the entire fall calendar internationally for the United States. People might recall the 2015 or the 2019 victory tours that felt like they just dragged on forever. It has now been whittled down to 1 international break, 3 games, and the entire 2024 Paris Olympic roster is guaranteed a spot because that's a big moneymaker, not only for the Federation, but also for these players. Now, that doesn't bar injury. So Tierna Davidson had to leave her match for Gotham over the weekend. It seems like whatever she's dealing with is serious is enough to hold her out of this international window. Croy Bethune, as people might know, suffered a season-ending injury. Not even that much longer after the Olympics. And then Trinity Rodman, who has been dealing with some back pain, some back issues. She did have some limited minutes for the Spirit over the weekend, but she is not quite ready to play in these games. Crystal Dunn has been away from Gotham for a number of weeks with an excused absence. U.S. Soccer delineated her absence here as a personal commitment. So not an injury for Dunn. Seems like she has something that is keeping her away from the sport at the moment. And then also on the flip side, Hayes was asked about Sophia Smith. Maybe you're thinking, well, if all these players are injured, why is Sophia Smith on the roster? Smith is good to go, they say. So Smith has not played for Portland in a couple of weeks with an ankle injury, but Hayes has been told by the Portland training staff that Smith is good to go. She's going to play this weekend for Portland, and she's going to be fine to play in these games. So that's kind of the rundown to start. So if you're asking questions of like, I don't know, why is this player here and why is that player here? If they were on the Olympic roster, that's why. And Hayes did say that she was limited in getting to kind of rotate the roster because of that. She specifically asked for a 26-player roster rather than 23 because it is 3 different games. She's very mindful of where things are in both the European calendar for the European place players and the players in the NWSL who are about to be going into the playoffs. We're going to see a lot of rotation. We're probably going to see 3 different starting 11s in all 3 of these games. But she did mention that she was limited by the fact that she did need to call all of those players in. it's doing business. It's just doing business with the federation. They need to make their money so that they can pay the players what they're worth and invest in youth programs and all that good stuff. So that is the situation that we're in with this victory tour. But now I want to switch over to what Hayes said about a couple absences or actually inclusions in the roster. I thought she gave some very good answers about some very specific players. I think probably the number one question everybody has, they look at this roster, they goes, where Lily Johannes, who is the incredible teenage midfielder who plays for Ajax in the Netherlands. As everyone knows, she is going to be a dual citizen. She has the opportunity to play for either the Netherlands or the United States. She's under the age of 18. She is still making that choice. She was not on the Olympic roster for that very reason. So when Hayes was asked about Johannes, what she basically said today was that she doesn't have any clear updates. She says she's a really young player, has been playing her domestic club football in the Netherlands. So understandably, she wants to take the time at her age and her stage before she makes an important decision. But there has been communication post-Olympics between Lily and us at the Federation, so I'm always optimistic. But I don't like to pressure anybody in this situation, and at the moment, I don't have an update. But I still very much harbor the hopes that Lily will represent the U.S. in the future, end quote. So there has been communication with Lily Johannes. Really seems like a toss-up, really a 50-50 situation. Hayes talks a lot, and I'll talk about this in a second, about the fact that they're going to extend the player pool significantly going into the international window to close out the year, which is going to be that trip to Europe. And then also in January, where they're going to host a big kind of all-inclusive U.S. soccer camp for both the top women's national team and the youth national teams. That's what Hayes keeps calling her futures camp. So they would love to hear from Johannes. It's probably not the answer that fans want to hear, but sounds like things are still ongoing. But yeah, her not being on this roster, it means something. It always means something when you are pursuing a player of that quality. Maybe on the flip side, there are two players from PSG on this roster. One is Corbin Albert, who, like I said, was going to be on this roster no matter what as an Olympic gold medalist. But they have Gaetino, who is also playing for PSG. And it was a very good question, a salient question about the fact that PSG is not going to be playing Champions League football. And there is always this question, I think, from the American media and American fans of what is that push-pull of European football for these players versus playing in the NWSL? Are these players getting competitive games? Are they getting more competitive games in Europe? Are they getting more competitive games in the NWSL? Hayes says about PSG not playing in the Champions League, she says, I'm not worried. They're still playing competitive games week in and week out. They're playing at a high level in the French league and competing for titles there. So the yardstick isn't that you have to be playing in the Champions League. You have to be testing yourself at the highest level. You have to be performing consistently. And yes, I think PSG are one of the top clubs in the world, end quote. So she kind of goes on after that to say that this is a camp. She wants to see how people are performing. She wants to see Albert take the next step from the Olympics. She hasn't gotten a chance to see Gaetino herself because that was the Twyla Kilgore era when she got her first call up. So she's not committing any huge things to this particular roster, but she does say that she doesn't consider PSG only being in the French league for this particular season to be an issue. I might respectfully disagree, but we'll see. We'll see how things kind of go in the next couple of months, which leads us to that question of, okay, we're sort of in this in-between period. It's the victory tour, but we've got some new people in. What is the long-term future? And Hayes has talked about this because she's been on a little bit of an NWSL tour. She's taken in 3 or 4 different NWSL games so that she can watch some of these players who did not play in the Olympics in person. She's been watching NWSL. She mentions the U20 World Cup, that team that did so well at the World Cup. They got 3rd. She mentions the U23s. She's very, I think at this point, engaged in getting every sort of youth program as well as the senior team on the same page. The U.S., especially U.S. soccer, is trying to, people may have seen some of the off the scene, it feels kind of businessy, but they're moving this whole complex to Atlanta because they want to develop what really feels like a unified front from the senior team all the way down to develop a national playing style, a national identity, a sustainable player pipeline to, ensure success for years and years to come. And I think that's been a big concern on the U.S. soccer side, that we don't have these kinds of national ID, these national scouting. We do have the pay-to-play system. There are so many barriers to being able to play at a high level in the United States. What does that mean for the sustainability of the women's program? And here's what Hayes has to say about the big plans for January. She says, we're going to have a WNT and YNT conference there, the first of its kind, where all youth coaches, national team coaches, and the staff in and around the teams come together so we can deliver a unified strategy. And most importantly, when the WNT are training, the futures camp will be going side by side. So if I'm coaching on one side and that session finishes, I'm able to then be involved with the session on the other side. And I think the important part is the collaboration, especially with the NWSL. So I've been communicating across the board, at the board level, the general management level, the head coaching level. The plans are not just for this camp, for the November camp for the future, just to make sure that we are aligned. And most importantly, that we build trust. And she kind of implies like trust with the player pool, so that these players feel like they're being ID'd, they're being taken care of, they're being developed, and their club situations are being considered when the US soccer cycle is kind of making their decisions. So we're seeing a lot of things happen right now. And I also feel like Hayes, and I think actually that's a really good signifier of where Hayes is at sort of mentally when she talks about they're doing a lot of strategy prep, they're doing tactical prep, they're in the preparation mode to do this sort of big, larger arc going into 2027 and 2028, because we are moving into the tinkering mode now, where the big job, the big kind of like patch job of getting that Olympic gold has been done. We saw them do that very well. You can go back to this show and talk about that whole journey, but now they need to set up sustainability for the future. And this is the first step in doing that, which leads me to believe that Emma Hayes right now is very much in a like, what have I seen today mode. Twyla Kilgore, there was that whole era or that whole kind of period of the team where there was a big element of trust. You had Kilgore on the ground while Hayes finished her tenure at Chelsea. Kilgore had to communicate with Hayes. Hayes, really was just trying to do two things at once, or actually even keep the US away for a little bit while she finishes that Chelsea tenure. But now it feels very much like Hayes is, what have my eyes seen? What has my analytics team noted? What have I gone to go see in person? What have I had the chance to send my staff to go see? And we're seeing that sort of personal touch for the first time as it regards to the player pool. I think Hayes did a fabulous job of sort of hitting the broad strokes with that Olympic squad. And now we're finally seeing her put her touches on what she wants the long-term future of the program to be. One of the good examples was she was asked about Ashley Sanchez today. And it was a good question sort of about that larger arc of what has Sanchez done or developed or improved from last year to this year to kind of get called back into this US environment. And she goes, well, I watched her. She's just like, well, I watched her. I went to that Chicago Red Stars game where North Carolina was playing Chicago, and I saw her and I saw what she meant to that team, and I saw the way that she played. And I thought that was a player that we wanted to have in camp. It just is almost that simple. It feels like Hayes is sort of, despite all of these big machinations behind the scenes, and I'm sure there's a lot that she's not telling media about the process, she's like, well, I saw it. I am getting to finally kind of sink my teeth into what this ecosystem looks like. She talks about Yasmin Ryan, the very good forward for Gotham who got a call up. She says that Ryan has improved not only going forward, but going backwards. And I think you have to at the top level, which I thought was an interesting tactical note, that sort of emphasis still on full team defending, and the fact that at the international level, you really have to be a two-way player. You can be as good on the ball as you want, or you can be, as good of an attacking player, or a speedy attacker, or thinking going forward all the time. But as we know, there is that emphasis, especially for Hayes squads, and this was true at Chelsea as well, of that press, the ability to win the ball back. And I think that you see something like Ryan, again, that development right away. She notes the current form of Jaden Shaw, Alyssa Thompson, and Olivia Moultrie, and them getting call-ups. She says of Shaw, she says, how disappointed she was that she didn't get to see Shaw play at the Olympics despite staying with that team. She says what a teammate she was during that period, and I was very hopeful she would make it back, but that wasn't to be the case. She's recovered from her injury. She's in a good rhythm. I do think it's notable that Shaw stayed with the United States during that Olympic period, despite not being able to play, and clearly in retrospect, probably never getting close to being able to play. I think that Hayes thinks incredibly highly of Jaden Shaw and has big plans for her. Really nice vote of confidence to have her right back in, get her right back on the pitch for them. So important. Talk about Alyssa Thompson. Alyssa Thompson is a player who is on that World Cup squad, who has kind of fallen off the U.S. Women's National Team, not radar, but she hasn't been getting as many call-ups. She gets called up as a training player. She gets to meet Hayes when called in as a training player over the summer. Hayes says that she spoke with her when she did come into camp as a training player, and she understood what she needed to do. And I've really appreciated her sort of living up to her own expectations for herself and demonstrating the behaviors and the performances that she wanted to see from herself. So we're already seeing Hayes develop a relationship with Thompson, who, as we all know, has been in incredible form in the last 5-6 weeks of the NWSL regular season. She mentions Olivia Moultrie being a player who she values her quality and her innate quality on the ball, and she's only 19 years old, and she's coming back from an injury and sort of wanted to continue to keep developing that player, because that's the player not only for 2027, 28, but you hope, and beyond. It's all sort of this developing, moving things forward. And I think it was nice to see those players get the call in with the available roster space that the team had. So what am I excited to see? Who am I excited to see? after getting some of that feedback from Hayes. One player I want to note that I was really excited to see get called back in was Haley Mace, Kansas City's Haley Mace. I was actually like literally wondering about this watching Kansas City's game last weekend, just wondering about her standing with the U.S. Women's National Team pool. She's a great Swiss Army knife of a player. She has very good, awareness on the pitch. She's good in a lot of different places, which as we know is highly valued by the U.S. Women's National Team. She hasn't been in with the team in a couple of years, and frankly, she struggled with the speed of play when she was in with the team about 2 years ago. But I don't think that on current form, that doesn't mean she deserves a look. I would be really interested to see if there's room for a player like Haley Mace on this team. The player that comes to mind always when I watch her play is Emily Sonnet. You see that player who is so versatile. Is that the next step for someone like Haley Mace? I would love to see Hal Hirschfeld and Emily Sams actually get into a game. There was kind of a funny note in the U.S. roster notes today about the fact that Sams is an Olympic gold medalist without first earning a cap because she was on the bench for 2 of those games at the Olympics. Want to see her actually get time, and I believe that we will. Want to see Hirschfeld actually get time, and I believe that we will. I would like to see some goalkeeper rotation. Casey Murphy has had another excellent year in the NWSL, and as incredible as Alyssa Nair is, they need to get serious about who her successor is going to be. I think, Nair is not showing any signs of slowing down. I am not kicking Alyssa Nair to the curb. She did a fabulous job in the Olympics. She's a good goalkeeper, and she is, if not but one of the best Olympic U.S. Women's National Team goalkeepers of all time. But they have to get serious about this multi-year process of finding her successor where they just simply haven't been in the past. And then the final thing is I would like to see some diversified goal scoring. These teams are playing Iceland, they're playing Argentina. I think it is fair to say that they should expect to win those games at home. Would certainly be interesting if they didn't, but those should be the expectations for the reigning Olympic gold medalists. And as much as I love the triple espresso, Trinity Rodman is out of this camp. Sophia Smith is coming back from injury. Mallory Swanson is trying to kind of maintain her load level going into after carrying heavy minutes for Chicago and for the U.S. Women's National Team. I want to see some diversified goal scoring, maybe from some deeper lying players. As much as I thought it was great how the U.S. was able to unlock defenses and stretch the field and really rely on the brilliance and the interplay of that triple espresso. That's not the goal right now. That's not the goal at the end of 2024, right? If you want to get them finally tuned again, that's a goal for 2027. How do you maintain that? How do you know that? But you also have to just get ready for the idea of there has to be the ability to score on multiple different levels. Would love to see a player like Jenna Neiswanger get in the mix. I know she's a fullback, but I'm like, I want to see her score U.S. Women's National Team goals. I want to see Sanchez get involved. I want to see Rose Lavelle even get a little bit more involved in the goal scoring. And I think that just sort of, again, talk about the health of the program and what this means for the present and the future. Those are the kinds of things you want to see from a camp like this, where we're kind of half in, half out on the total rehaul. So I think it's exciting times for the U.S. Women's National Team. I think this is a good approach to, like I said, is a contractually obligated victory tour, Olympic break. They're not able to leave the country. They're not playing kind of top FIFA ranked talent. This is a good time to sort of get these players in the mix. Hayes really, again, just sort of get in there and do her thing more and more. And we're going to really start to see, I think, the actual true identity of an Emma Hayes team during this international break and beyond. And I'm excited to see that. I think that this is a very exciting time to be a U.S. Women's National Team fan. There are so many talented players. I feel very confident in where the team is going. And as much as you want to see those great players from the Olympics, you don't want to get caught in more of the same. And you just want to keep everybody healthy because there's some big domestic football to be played at the end of this year as well. So now turning over to the other order of the week, the other order of the day, the WNBA Finals are still raging. Wednesday night, Game 3, the New York Liberty take a crucial 2-1 lead over the Minnesota Lynx. They are one win away from winning their first ever WNBA title. It was another bonkers finish, another close game, 80-77 win. This one almost went into overtime again after the team losing by double digits again, came back to snag a victory again with no time left, except this time it was New York coming back against the Lynx rather than the Lynx coming back against the Liberty. Sabrina Ionescu with the shot of her life. This is how legends are written in. She has the game clinching a 3-pointer after honestly having kind of a rough game, kind of a rough fourth quarter. Shows that Mamba mentality, that ice cold mentality to get that shot off. Have the confidence in herself to do so. Minnesota in this game led by as much as 15. They had a halftime lead. It's pretty interesting, I think. It's like I keep referring to this as like tennis, but sometimes these series just feel that way. It's like a tennis match where no one can hold serve. And I always find that interesting. Like it's easier to break serve, I guess, than to hold it in this particular matchup. And it's been a series of runs. It's been a series of of confidence and people staying calm. And we saw that again. It was a very compelling basketball game. These two teams were playing their guts out, knowing that this was probably going to be one of the major deciding moments of the entire series. New York comes back in the second half due to a 30-point performance from Brianna. We are not effing losing this game. Stewart, you saw her on the sideline. She was pumped. She was locked in. Stewie said, "This is not happening to me. I am not letting this happen to me again." And then I do think if the Liberty do pull this off, and there's been some good stuff written specifically yesterday and today with the idea that the Liberty are kind of tipping towards finally getting their first ever franchise title. It's their sixth time trying. They have been in the finals so many times. They have been in this league for so long. That shot by UNESCO is going to be remembered forever. And in terms of the arc, the great arc of the league, you are seeing some of that history being written. And I'm so curious to see if the Lynx are able to bounce back. But that felt like a big, big moment. And I also think, again, I'm very bad at predictions, but I do have to go back to my initial assessment of this series watching that game as well. The larger arc of the game, not just sort of the furious comeback in the second half, where kind of my final statement was that Minnesota, despite everything that they do so well, can't necessarily overcome an off night to a key starter, whereas the Liberty has those players, has that depth, has that length to have a player like UNESCO, who was struggling in the first sort of 3/4 of that game, or Jonquel Jones, who is still kind of struggling to impose herself against that sort of savvy defense by the Lynx. But that player for Minnesota, unfortunately, on Wednesday was center Alana Smith, who got caught in serious foul trouble in the middle 2/4 of the game, and she suffered an injury, kind of seemed like a painful injury, committing one of those fouls. If you look at the box score, Smith's plus minus was a plus 20, and her backup, Maisha Hines-Allen's plus minus was a negative 19. And you go, how can you say that that was the off night by Smith? But the answer is that they needed her on the court, and she could not stay on the court. And that was the off night that Minnesota just couldn't overcome to hold on to that lead in the second half with Stewart playing so well. Stewart liked, she mentioned after the game, Stewart said she liked the assignments that she had. She liked the defensive assignments that she was working against. That is a tell that the Lynx just were having, if they didn't have that starting center with Alana Smith on the court, that gave up the lead. That is like the difference. It's very simple, but when you look at that individual game, that was the off night that the Lynx couldn't afford to have. And I do think Smith, I hope she is feeling okay. She appeared to be in some distress. I think it was hard to gauge, though, when you have a player who is going through the emotions of picking up her fourth foul at the beginning of the third quarter, and also she's in pain. It's very hard to tell exactly how much is injury and how much is just frustration, because she knows how important she is to her team. So I do hope that Smith is able to bounce back in game 4, because the Lynx need her very badly, and the season that she's had kind of deserves a bounce back game there. But I do think New York's momentum is significant here. That was a game, again, between two teams giving everything they had. It was blow for blow. It was such a good game. I was like, I finished that game just like romantic about playoff basketball. What a fabulous series this has been. But those are the questions, right? Can Smith bounce back? Can Jonquel Jones maybe dominate the way that we keep waiting for her to dominate in this series? Can UNESCO get that balance of good shots right? UNESCO has been very mindful. It's been interesting to watch her series as well. She's given a number of quotes talking about her usage or her shot selection and not wanting to waste possessions. This feels like something that maybe head coach Sandy Brondello has been sort of emphasizing with her, of just not having wasteful possessions or encouraging turnovers by taking shots that you shouldn't be taking. Now, I don't think she got that balance right at the beginning of game 3. She did not, I don't think, have a single shot until maybe just around the 5-minute mark of the second quarter. They need more from her there. But also, you look at, if you over usage, if you do turn the ball over, that gives the Lynx the opportunity to push tempo the other way. And as we saw, the Lynx were cutting in transition, those backcourt runs. It was so cool to see. They looked exhausted by the end of it. I always just wonder when the gas tank is going to empty for the Lynx, but I do think UNESCO this is her still kind of leveling up in real time. We've seen her like every single year make different changes to the way that she plays, whether it's bringing the ball up the court or her shot selection or her defense. Her perimeter defense is very important to this series. But what we're seeing now is, how do you, on this super team where you know that you're trying to get all these different looks to all these different players, and you need to be very mindful of not being wasteful in your offensive schemes because of how quickly Minnesota can send the ball the other way. How do you get that balance right? On the Lynx side, I just feel like we're seeing WNBA Finals Nafisa Collier for the first time, and it's so compelling. But Stewart won that battle in Game 3. You're seeing, again, these former UConn teammates, the senior and the freshman, right? This is like WNBA Finals senior versus WNBA Finals freshman. And you saw what Stewart was able to do in Game 3. Can Collier go ahead and do it right back in Game 4? I think the Lynx felt very disappointed in that loss. They had over 18,000 fans behind them. It was an incredible atmosphere at Target Center in Minnesota, and they just couldn't get it done. I would like to think they're going to push this to 5, but I wonder if this is now the game that tips everything into New York's favor. And my final note on that is just, I keep, gushing about these finals, but looking at the bigger picture for the WNBA, if you've listened to this show, if you've listened to any other show, if you've read the work, if you've followed social media, everyone knows what an important year this is for the WNBA and the growing pains and some of the positive things about the immense growth in the WNBA and some of the challenges of the immense growth of the WNBA, and that question of what does this final series look like when Caitlin Clark's not in it, which I do think is a relevant question because there is evidence that more people tune in when Caitlin Clark is playing, and that's fine. But the high tides have continued to rise. Both first 2 games of the WNBA Finals averaged over 1 million viewers for the first time. It's only building momentum. Well, for the first time in like 20 years. I always get nervous. Like around the turn of the century, like 2002, 2003, there were some incredible TV numbers. So I'm not trying to erase those. But in the modern era, let's say, of the WNBA, for the first time averaging over 1 million viewers in the first 2 games. These teams pre-expansion are like the best they're going to be for a little while. I hope people are reveling in it. I've just been so happy that the product has been so good. And yes, there are stars, and yes, there are people that people know by name, but they're also being introduced to some really incredible players that they may not have known. You've got that Collier versus Stewart battle of the UConn teammates and the unrivaled business partners. We're seeing well-coached basketball. We're seeing this sort of heir to New York basketball and Sabrina Ionescu finally get her big moment and start to write her name into the history books. We're seeing hidden gems like Courtney Williams on the Lynx side and Kayla McBride get their due. We're seeing a rookie like Leonie Fiebe. She's shooting incredibly well, just even from like 3-pointers in these playoffs. She looks like a seasoned veteran. I'm just so happy that the product is so good. I'm so happy this has been so competitive. And so even if this wraps up in 4 and doesn't go to 5, I hope everyone has really enjoyed the intensity of these games, the basketball you've gotten to see, and just what a fabulous cap to what will be remembered as, if not always, let's say like a pleasant or positive or perfect year for the WNBA. It is a significant year for the WNBA, and we are watching significant basketball, and that freaking rules. So Game 4 on Friday, Game 5 on Sunday. Don't miss it. Tune in. This is going to be an incredible home stretch to this series. And so that has been today's edition of The Late Sub. I am your host, Claire Watkins. Shout out producer extraordinaire Parker Fenton. Next week, we're going to have maybe an interview or 2 to show you. We're going to have some really exciting things happening. I think, obviously, we're going to wrap up WNBA Finals. We're going to be talking U.S. Women's National Team. I keep prepping to talk about college basketball preseason, which we will get to eventually. There's some cool stuff coming up down the pike. We cannot wait to chat about it. Everybody, we'll see you next time.